Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. This topic today is on 10 things about SharePoint forms you never knew were possible. Well, hopefully that's true, but at the very least, many of these things you probably don't do or have never done with your SharePoint forms. So I think that you'll find this interesting. Before we jump into our main presentation, I'm going to do a quick intro and cover some ground rules. I'm Will Cooper. I am a SharePoint solutions developer. I do my own SharePoint consulting business. I work with all kinds of different customers using SharePoint, both SharePoint on-premise and SharePoint online. Additional to that, I have a YouTube channel called SharePoint Smart. You can find that and subscribe. There's all kinds of videos about how to do cool things in SharePoint. And another thing I do, I have a SharePoint product called SharePointDashboards.com. That's a companion tool set. It's specifically for SharePoint Online users and allows you to make really cool dashboards, and it works very well in combination with our featured toolkit today, which is Ultimate Forms. Ultimate Forms is a software provided by InfoWise, and I'm also part of their team. Our philosophy is about making things simple and easy to do, and we're all about improving our tools to make them better and more useful to help you build SharePoint solutions. Ultimate Forms is a full solution toolkit that you can add to your SharePoint environment, and it's done entirely inside of the SharePoint interface. You don't have to install any other software or use any other tools. And you don't have to be a programmer. This is a no-code solution. You can do it entirely through the user interface. So we're going to be focused on these forms, and we're looking at Ultimate Forms. Our main presentation is going to go for about 30 minutes, and then we're going to go on to a bonus topic. If you have a little bit of extra time, we'll talk more about SharePoint dashboards. As I mentioned, SharePoint for Ultimate Forms is available both for the cloud, so for Microsoft 365, or for on-premise SharePoint. Either of those environments, you'll be able to use the tools that I show you. This diagram is the way that I tend to think about SharePoint. You can do a great many things in SharePoint, but it's quite difficult if you don't have additional tools with your environment. So out of the box can be a bit plain and boring. With Ultimate Forms, you can do a lot. It allows you to build full-featured solutions, build dynamic forms, and do really cool things, which is what we're going to get into in our presentation. Standard out-of-the-box SharePoint forms are boring, ridiculously boring. They're not dynamic in any way. What you see is a screenshot of the side panel form that opens by default when I am editing a list record in SharePoint, and completely useless in the context of the types of functionality that we want to achieve. Really only appropriate just for the most simple scenarios, so not good. So what is it that we want to achieve? Let's just talk about our goals in terms of what it is that we want to do with forms in SharePoint and what we strive for. Forms should be dynamic. That means that they change according to conditions. It could be based on the status of a process. It could be based on the user role. An administrative user would be doing more things with the record than a regular user, as an example. We want to indicate things like status by making use of colors and icons, because we're trained to think in that way instead of just having, a plain white and gray form. Instructions in terms of how to do the process should be baked in. We should be able to have information on hand as we're doing a process that tells us what to do. These forms should adapt according to whatever the situation is. So that again plays into dynamic forms. We want to use visual indicators as much as we can with our forms to create a better user experience. And I should mention, I didn't say a couple of things. If you have questions, we would like to hear those, and I will address them during the presentation. You can use the Q&A tool in the webinar, and then this will be recorded and available on YouTube later today. So I just want to make sure you guys know that you have an opportunity to ask questions during the presentation. Continue on. Forms meeting bare minimum requirements are not engaging. So that's the plain vanilla form I showed earlier. It tends to not get much of a response, or we just don't get any kind of excitement or enjoyment or engagement from the users. So we really need to go beyond that, especially with all the new web technology things out there. We expect more. So the way to do that, we need to add extra features and have at least a little bit of excitement, and that will improve engagement and response. Forms should be easy to understand, and they should be fun. It should be fun to use it. It should make sense. It should be a refreshing experience for your user. So after setting up your main form, which kind of includes the basic nuts and bolts, you should be looking for opportunities to improve that user experience. So now we're going to jump to it, and we're going to take a look at actually more than 10 things you can do to improve your forms, and these will be some techniques that you haven't seen or haven't used in any of your SharePoint forms yet. So I have an example tool that I've created, which is for approval requests, and that's what I'm using as my example to demonstrate the concept. I'm going to begin by going through this tool and look at it from a user perspective in terms of what they experience, and I'll call out these features and functionality that I've added to the form that wouldn't normally be included in a SharePoint form. After I've shown it to you from a user perspective, I'm going to show you how easy it is for you to enable all of this functionality without having to do any custom programming. And what's really awesome is after my presentation, I'm going to load this template to the ultimate form. So I'm going to show you how you can try that for free, and you can download it today. So everything I'm demonstrating, you can get into this form yourself. You can play around with it. You can make adjustments and have exactly what you're seeing in this presentation. So the concept in this tool that I've made is a way to approve documents, technical documents for a knowledge base for a business. So I'm going to make a new request to approve a document revision that I'm sending. So I'm going to pick a category. I'm going to say research, and I'll say this is updated water sample instructions. There's a lot going on here. In truth, I would not normally include all of these different things all in one form. So in some ways, this is a demonstration of different things. You can pick and choose which things you may want to include in your form. Depending on the situation, some things are going to be more useful than others. So I'll start to call out some of the functionality. One thing you may have noticed right away, we have a dynamic title bar. It's automatically including dynamic information in the header. It's including the request description, it's including the name of the person who made the request, and then the current status. Notice also it has a background color, and that's changing dynamically according to the status. Recall I mentioned it's good to use colors that correlate to the status of the process. Another thing going on, I have real-time validation going on. You'll notice that I have a border around these top fields that's telling the user that the required information has been provided. Notice I've got a red box here, and you'll see it change when I type this in. Now what's cool is this is all real time. You'll see things change on the fly. In the form, I have a connected lookup field. This can be useful in a situation where you want to have a drop down, but there may be hundreds of choices depending on your situation. Imagine, for example, you have a list of all of your customers, maybe hundreds of customers, and maybe you want to break that out into categories. What I want you to see is that when I change this secondary drop down updates to corresponding values according to that. So that's what you might call a filtered lookup or a connected lookup. What you'll also notice is maybe when I'm filling out this form, all of those options aren't there yet. And that could be a hassle if I have to go over to the separate SharePoint list. I have an inline ability to add new entries to that. I can, rather than the user just types a value, I can have them add a new value and they could type in a subcategory and add that on the fly. So they don't have to leave the form to do that. Okay, and then I have some of what I call baked in instructions. I'm a big advocate for including the instructions inline directly in the form so that the user doesn't have to leave. So if I need that detailed information on what to do, I can use this hover help feature. Notice there's a little information bubble there, and I've got bullet points that provide those precise details. Now, this functionality is great from this perspective. If I'm a new user, I want those detailed instructions, and I can be told by my management, if you need to know what to do, make sure you use that. If I'm a veteran user and I've filled out this form 100 times, I don't want to keep reading that over again, but I don't have to because I'm using this hover help functionality. Another thing closely related to that, I've also included a process diagram in the form. So in this case, I have an approval process, and this gives my users a visual understanding of the steps that are involved in this approval. In my case, it's really simple. In many cases, it may be more complicated. So rather than describing in text, I could show a picture that helps users understand the steps. What's also good is I have it small so that just like the baked in instructions, it's only going to give me that large detailed diagram if I hover on it. So I'm not being bombarded with information if I'm a veteran user. I've got a slider bar, and this is to indicate the number of approvers. So as you can tell, I can have from 1 to 3 approvers in the system, and that's how I've set up my form. And we're going to see later how I configured that. I've also got these plus minus buttons. So this is a lot more compelling of user experience than if I just say keyed in a number value into a input box. Okay, I've got a drag and drop for my attachments. That's an improvement over what you would normally experience in SharePoint. And I can simply take my Word document, drag it right onto the target box, and there it is. Couldn't really be any easier than that. So that's a lot of the story here, is we're trying to make a really easy to use, easy to understand experience. Now I've got my required fields and I can put in my approver names. Now this is going to look silly. I'm going to put my same name in here just so I can interact with this form. But what I want you to notice is that there are approval buttons. They'll only appear if you are the approver. So I'll put in a different name. For this one, you can see I don't have the approval buttons. Okay, so that's the preliminary submission of this approval request. I'll go ahead and save that. Newest is going to show on top on my dashboard. And just like the form, we really would like to have a dashboard that's dynamic and includes indicators and status in a way that's compelling and interesting for our users. Again, we don't want that plain white and gray user experience that's boring, where everything blends together. So I've got some background colors key to my status. So the ones that are in a requested state where approval is in process, those are highlighted blue. If it's declined, that's pink, and canceled is gray. These are easy to understand, universally understood concepts. I've also got an approval summary column that just shows me all in one consolidated column who the approvers are for that particular document, who's approved, who's rejected, where it's pending. Really easy to understand where things are on the approval for each of these records. Okay, so let me go back into my form and we'll talk about more dynamic functionality going on in this form. Okay, so what happens with the approval? Let's talk about that. Now, usually in a form, what you get is only current state. It's just that snapshot of that moment in time. And in something where there's multiple stages in a process, you're losing information there. What if I want to know when that last approval took place? Or maybe I want to know how long we've been waiting for the approval. We'd like to know a history of the steps involved. This form includes that kind of functionality. When I approve this, you're going to see that the background color changes to green in my approval section. My approval summary is updated. And when I return back to the form, you're going to see that there is a dynamic approval history section. It shows a date time stamp of the person who approved, and then what the specific update is. It indicates that I approved. Notice also this approval section is dynamic. It's changing background color according to its current state. If approval's pending, it's gray. If it's approved, it's green. As you can imagine, if it's declined, it's going to be pink. So that's how that works. I'll go ahead and click another one, and you're going to see that the approval history log was appended to, it was updated. So now I have a system that tells me not just current state, it's telling me where things were. When was the last step of the process? And that's helpful because I can know if things are stalled. It helps me to have the whole story about what happened and not just that one snapshot in time. So that's really useful. And then when we get to the end of the approval process, of course, we're going to have an updated overall status, and that is in the status column. Notice that we have some icons there. So we've got a blue arrow for requested, green check mark approved, red decline. So we're keeping that same concept with the colors, and now we've got some icons involved. We've got the dynamic header where the background color changes. So it's very intuitive and easy for me to understand where we are in this approval process. Now this approval system is pretty basic in terms of what we're doing, but you could see in a more complicated process where users get more confused, these tools that I'm using are increasingly valuable because it helps me understand a more complicated situation. Here we have the approvals from all three users. We've got all green for that, and so on. So there's a lot of functionality going on. I'm just looking through my list to see if there's any other additional things that I didn't describe that I demonstrated. I think I pretty much showed everything. We're going to now look at this form from the perspective of the person who's setting it up, because everything I showed, there's a lot going on, and it's probably hard to know how would you do that without custom programming, and I'm going to show you how that happens. So in our toolkit, which is Ultimate Forms, which you can download and use the entire software for free for 30 days, you can go into our Form Designer tool, and all of this functionality is enabled in that tool. I'm going to highlight how some of these things are done, and a lot of it is according to rules. So I'm going to go through the different form sections and help you understand how this is configured. What you'll be able to do later is download this template into an empty SharePoint site, and you can examine everything I'm describing in the presentation. So for any form element, I can add rules to it. So I have a style here for the font color to make that white, and then I have rules according to status. So I've said background color blue. I can just pick from the color swatches here, and then I say to apply this in the condition that status equals requested, and that gives me the blue background color. And then it's just the same concept, rinse and repeat. Here's green for status approved, and so on. That's how I made that dynamic header. The information in the text changes by referencing the SharePoint fields. So I included a few things in there from the form. One is the request, which is in quotes, and then the name of the requester, and then the status. So it's really easy for me to put those in there. I can just refer to the fields in square brackets. I don't even have to enter that myself. I can do things like double click down here and find my fields and then easily insert it in the text. Very easy to set up. You'll notice I have the borders going for required fields. The way I was able to do that is by setting up some more styles according to what's going on in that field. So in this case, I say, show me a red border in the case that the request is blank. And so it will be red until that condition changes. And then the inverse of that, which is, of course, when the request becomes not blank, I want it to be green border. And this is giving my user what I would call real-time validation. It's showing them their progress as they're filling out the form, helping them understand things they've completed and things that are missing. And this is a lot more pleasant experience than what we've all had, where I submit a form and it doesn't save and we get the dreaded validation error message. That's not pleasant, and it's not fun to have to go scrolling through a form to see what you did wrong or see what's missing. This helps avoid that for your user. It's real-time validation. The hover help feature, the way I set that up was very easy. There's a feature in here that says show description as pop-up, and then I enabled show on hover, and then I just get a rich text editor field. I could do highlighting, bold, bullets, you name it. Whatever I want to do here, I can, and I can really make this stand out however I want to do it. So that all enabled that hover help box. The similar effect was with the image that I set up, and I just referenced an image that I had loaded to SharePoint, and I was able to set up a hover effect for that. Here's our number slider. This is just a regular SharePoint number field, no different than any SharePoint number field you've already worked with. I simply enabled a feature that's in our software that says use slider, and then also show plus and minus. And that changed that from the boring text input where I just key in a number to something that's more pleasant for the user. I set the min and max values, and the slider adjusts accordingly. In the bottom of the form, we have some special functionality. Naturally, for this approval section, we want to make sure that only the designated approvers are able to do approval, and I'll show you how all of that comes together. So first of all, remember that according to the number of approvers selected, I need to show or hide these sections. So the first one is always going to be in play because there's always at least one approver. I don't need to set a rule on that container, but for container 2 and 3, I needed a rule. So I put a rule in here, and it's very easy to understand. I simply said if approvers is more or equal than 2, then make it writable. And it knows if that's not true, then it will automatically have the inverse of that, which is hidden. And you saw that happening in the form, real time. And then naturally it's the same thing for 3, except I say approvers more than or equal to 3. So that controls those containers showing up or not showing up. And then we have these approval buttons. So I need to do something special there because I want to make sure that the only one who clicks those approval buttons is the person who is designated as the approver. And the way I pulled that off is I set a write rule in here, and we have a special parameter called current user. So I simply was able to say, make sure everything in this box is writable if approver 1 matches whoever that current user is. So I saw the buttons when it's Will Cooper because that's me. Other users will not see the buttons, but they will be able to view the approval status. So that's how we have that dynamic approval situation going on. How about approval history? That was done by using the buttons and appending to this field. This is a field that I have set read only because I'm only writing information into it. The user won't interact with that directly. It just displays this log that I've created. The log is updated when the user does their approval or decline or reset. It all uses the same concept. So the first thing I have for this button, when they click on that, I want to update the status of approval 1 to approved. And then I do have a little bit of HTML in here to try to make it look nice. And you can check that out when you download this template. But the gist of it is I tell it to go ahead and write in the name of the person who made the update, and then it simply says, they approve. So one thing that's good about this, although I had to do a little code, what I was able to do is copy that, and then I could paste it when I went over to these other fields and make minor adjustments. So every single one of these buttons is set to do two things: update the approval status field for each section, and additionally write an entry into this special approval history log that I created in the bottom. It will do both of those things, and this is a action and save button, so it also at the same time saves out of the form. So that's how all of this different kind of dynamic functionality would work. In real life, when I'm doing an approval system for a customer or building any kind of a thing, the first thing I'm interested in is just the basic form layout. So as I was building this, I certainly didn't have all of these features going. I started with the fields that I need. I knew that I was going to need a description of the request, I needed the name of the requester, and so on. So there's an order to the process, and there's layers to it. So naturally, you want to lay out what I would call the static form first. Make sure you have all your fields in there, make sure it can capture all the information. And it's at that point that I'm going to circle back and look for opportunities to add dynamic functionality to make a more engaging user experience. I don't want to save the changes I just made. So later today, we're going to have this template available when we upload our YouTube video. And if you download our trial software, or if you're already an Ultimate Forms customer, you can go to our solution catalog. On our main settings screen, click on Solution Catalog and then click on Webinars. If you can remember those two steps, you'll be good to go, because the very first tile that you'll see later today is going to be for this approval system I created. So you can just click on that. It's really easy to use this. You just click this button and make sure you do that in a blank site. So make a sub-site or new site just for you to sandbox this example, and you can interact with everything that I created today in this example. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up to questions. So in our interface, there is a Q&A section. So if you have questions about any of the functionality I demonstrated, this would be a great time for you to enter that in the Q&A, and I'll do my best to answer your questions. I'll give you guys a minute to think about that. And as you're doing that, I'm going to give you some more information. So these tools that are used to build a solution are available at infowisesolutions.com. And on that main page, prominently featured, you'll see Try Now for free. Make sure you click that and then click on the Install Now. If you're not a SharePoint admin or don't have the rights to do that right this second, you can also additionally do our online trial as well. That's on the InfoWise server, so that's a way to try right away if you're waiting to install the trial software. And as I say, those are our full tools that are available for 30 days. There's lots of information on our website. Of course, we have a webinar section, and those are recordings of our monthly webinars, and there's all kinds of different examples of solutions that you can build in SharePoint, and all of those have downloadable templates as well, so you can download those. If you're just getting started with our tools, what I would recommend is go to our tutorials page. You'll notice a section called Kickstart Training, and if you've never built any of our forms before, that's a great place to start. This gives you step-by-step instructions with screenshots, and it'll show you how to use our form builder for the very first time. So that's a really good place to begin, and then beyond that, there's lots of other tutorials that can give you great instructions. So those are some things to look at when you're very first trying Ultimate Forms. Another thing that I'll mention for you is we have the demo request form. So you don't have the ability to talk during our presentation today, but we're certainly interested and ready to talk to you. The way you can do that is just to Scroll down the main page on the InfoWiseSolutions.com site, enter your contact information, and we will reply back. We'll schedule a meeting and we'll answer any of your SharePoint questions and any of your questions about our software, and we'll give you a full demonstration of our tool. So that's another thing you can do if you want to have a conversation and have some questions answered so you can learn more about the toolkit. All right, I don't see any questions at the moment. I'm going to move on to the second part of our presentation, and we'll talk about SharePoint dashboards.
Voice is not recognized.
My smart TV behind me has decided to come to life. I had to turn that off. Okay, so here's SharePoint dashboards. This is specifically for SharePoint Online. So if you're on-premise SharePoint, I'm sorry, but these tools won't work for that. They're not compatible unless you have SharePoint Server Subscription Edition. In that case, you would be good to go. But mainly, this is for SharePoint Online. So what is SharePoint dashboards? These are dashboard templates that you can apply to do formatting on dashboards. And in fact, in the solution I demonstrated today, there are 3 that were used. The 3 things that I use, which you saw here, one is the edit button. That's a free template that you can access and get. And that's a very popular and common use because obviously people very often need to get to the edit form for a record. So that little green button that you see. Another is the approval summary. So you can see this has the green check boxes or red X or gray box. That is a template available, and I'm going to show you each of those. And then another one here is the row highlighting, which gives background colors according to the status field. So if you haven't used SharePoint dashboards before, what's nice is you can sign up for free, and there are 21 free templates available to you. So if you click on that Start button, you'll see a picture and a description of all the ones you get to do for free. All you got to do is put in your name and email address, and you're good to go. And then if you decide to go on, there are actually a total of 171 templates on here, and you can scroll through this gallery page to see a preview of different templates. These are all templates that give visual indicators for dashboards so you can make SharePoint look nice. So the 3 that I mentioned that you saw in the main presentation are the edit button. So that's one of the free templates that's right here. And all that you have to do on the page is just pick different configuration options. You can make your edit button look however you want. You can pick your colors, you pick your border, you can pick what it looks like when you hover it. All of those things are totally configurable according to however you like things to look. So that was the edit button. Another is the approval summary. That is right here. That can actually accommodate for up to 10 approvers. And like I say, you have complete control over the look and feel of that column. So you can pick your icons, you can pick your background colors. All of those look and feel options are very easy. And as with Ultimate Forms, you have to do no code. At never at any point will you ever do any programming. It's just simple copy and paste. That's all you have to do. And then the third one that was in there, it was row formatting, and it was according to a condition. This is a very simple template. You just pick the background colors that you want, and you enter your different statuses and indicate which field that you're mapping to, like that. And then you can copy and paste that template directly to your SharePoint site, and then you'll have that cool looking row background color effect. All of these different templates are featured on my YouTube channel, so if you haven't already checked that out, I hope that you do. Once again, that's called SharePoint Smart. If you do a search for that, it should pop right up. And there's over 200 videos on my YouTube channel featuring all of these different templates and also instructional tutorials on how to do a lot of cool things in SharePoint. So I hope you'll take a peek at that. So that's what I wanted to share with you about SharePoint dashboards. And I'll pause again. And once again, just go ahead and use the Q&A if you have any questions that you'd like me to answer, either about the dynamic forms I was demonstrating with Ultimate Forms or about SharePoint dashboards. Any questions at all? Oh, all right. Now I see some questions popping up. Okay, give me a second, guys, and I'll go through them. There's a question about do the forms work well with Power Apps. This is a replacement for Power Apps. If you're using Ultimate Forms, you would use this instead of Power Apps. So this, in my opinion, is much easier and more fluid and easier to work with. I use this exclusively for form building, and I don't use Power Apps at all in my solutions because I have this toolkit. Can history be sorted from newest to oldest? Yes, of course. You can do what I call pre-pen mode or pen mode. If you want newest on top, in the little code thing that I have, you just put the history. You can either have the history on the end or the beginning. Very easy to make that adjustment. The image hover effect, John, that's something I can cover with email with you. Basically, you can just add a little CSS for that. It's really easy to do. I'll send you a note on that later. Let's see. We got a couple more. One more question. Oh, okay. Somebody asked about the recording. Just a reminder, that'll be on YouTube, and I will have that up later today. That's on the InfoWise Solutions YouTube channel, another awesome channel with all of our webinars on it. So hopefully you'll check that out and subscribe to that as well. So that takes care of our presentation for today. I really appreciate everybody being here. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording.